Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Bible in Order Faith Friday special edition here with my friend Amanda Collins Johnson. Amanda is the author of Beyond Survival, Reclaiming My Life After I Survived Rape. She has a bachelor's degree in education in English and considers her greatest accomplishments as being her husband, Nate's wife, homeschooling mama to 3 daughters. Featured on several podcasts and publications on Fox and Friends and The Glenn Beck Show, she has shared her story on college campuses, at women's conferences, and at law enforcement conferences. She enjoys her time with her family, mentoring young women, leading Bible studies, and running. Amanda, thank you
Mhm.
for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's an honor, and I genuinely mean that. Your book just came out maybe a month ago. Is that right?
Yes.
So
Yep.
today's December 21st as we record in 2023,
Yeah.
and you've got this book, and you're ministering to people all over the world, hopefully.
Prayerfully, yeah. That's my prayer.
Yeah,
That
amen.
it will.
How is the book being received overall so far?
A lot of people have reached out to me. I've received a lot of private messages from readers who have just said, "Thank you so much for putting into words what I never could. And thank you for letting me feel seen. Thank you for writing what I couldn't." And a lot of readers have found like hope to healing, or have found that a new layer of healing has been peeled back for them. And that was my prayer, that the Lord would be glorified, and that that healing would be found, and victory would be found for everybody.
It's one thing to say that, right? I mean, and
hmm
and it can come off. I definitely don't think it comes off this way coming out of your mouth, but so often
Sure.
when we hear people say, all things work together for good, God gets the glory. How how does God get glory from a horrendous and tragic and horrible event like rape?
Hmm. I think it's so important to acknowledge that God does not delight in that. God does not delight in the evil. In fact, it took far too long for anyone to cry with me and tell me that when my soul was being murdered, the Father wept over me the way he wept over his son when he was dying on the cross. And so that's such an important distinction to make, is that God, he was not glorified in that act of evil. He is, however, the master of redemption. And he is in the midst of all of the hard, all the brutal. You think about the worst act in humanity when Jesus was dying on the cross. That's what brought us all salvation. He worked that out for our good. And he said, I've really wrestled with this, and I still do, about Romans 8:28, for the Lord works all things out for the good of those who love him. And I used to really, really struggle that God even really desired good for me because of what I went through when I was so young, where it was we had a lot of wrestling matches, the Lord and I, of I just don't see it. I don't see how this is good. I don't see how I'm supposed to rejoice in this. This is garbage. This is trash. You're lying. And really what it came down to is I had to adjust my thinking of what good was. Because my human idea of what good is not what the Lord is concerned about. The Lord is concerned about my eternal soul. He is concerned about refining me and making me more like Christ. He's concerned about growing me into the woman that he's designed me to be. And he is able, as the master redeemer, to use those horrific acts of violence that I've been subjected to because we live in a broken, fallen world. That is, I mean, we suffer the consequences of our free will that was gifted to us. And so, yeah, like it just takes submitting. And I don't say that easily, like, oh, you just have to submit. No, it's hard. It's not beautiful. Well, at least
Hmm.
when I do it, it's not a pretty thing. Um, but it's submitting and trusting to the promises that the Lord has given us, and that he is glorified because unfortunately it's the book has been needed. People have needed to read it. People have needed to know that he was with them in those moments. They have needed to know how to cross the bridge from the breathing dead into the land of the living through the redemptive power of Jesus. And so that's how he is glorified. It has absolutely nothing to do with me. Apart from him, it would not be possible, and this book would have never been written.
Hmm.
I can genuinely and honestly say that, and people who have been praying over me throughout the process would agree that apart from Jesus, like it would not exist.
Hmm. Wow. So, Amanda, obviously you went through this
Mm-hmm.
this tragic event, and what was your faith like in relation to it, your Christian faith? What was your faith like
Mm-hmm.
prior to that event?
I like just deeply love the Lord. I don't know how to explain. Like, I was on fire. I wanted to live for him and only him. Um, I had my whole life ahead of me. I was so excited. And and I can even say like I was almost prideful with my faith, if that makes sense. Like, not really acknowledging that it was a gift from the Lord. And I could never relate or understand how people struggled with their faith before this. Like, yeah, bad happens, but the
Mm,
Lord is still faithful. Like,
yeah.
how do you just abandon and forget everything that he has done, or like forget all the evidence that we have in our lives of who he is if we are Christians? Like, I could never fully wrap my head around that um prior to that.
So, here you are 20 years later, 15. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Oh, no, 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 that's okay. 16.
So,
16
okay,
years
so
later.
16 years later, I knew you weren't that old, but
Yeah.
um, so here you are 16 years later, and
Hmm.
obviously your faith really seems to be in a great place. I mean, you're still trusting the Lord, not that you've done it perfectly, not that any of us ever do.
Hmm.
Um, what's that journey been like? I imagine, I mean, did your faith, were you struggling in your faith after the rape?
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about that in my book. I'm pretty honest and real about what that was like, and I don't hold back punches. And I mean, there's more details in my book, but for the listeners who don't know my story, if it's okay, I can just give like a very quick recap. I was raped on my university campus at gunpoint by a complete stranger. And he went on to kidnap and rape his second victim, and he raped and murdered his last known victim. And he's currently sitting on death row in Nevada while he's serving 4 consecutive life sentences. Um, and so I reached this point in my faith where I guess it's worth mentioning that my husband and I got married like 7 months after my attack,
Mm,
because I was just trying to like, just keep pushing forward, not let this man have any more control over my life than what he'd already taken. And about 5 months into our marriage is when he was captured by the Reno police, and then that led to going through the whole judicial process. And the first preliminary trial caused me to have a miscarriage because of the stress, like the emotional stress and whatnot, that I was going through at the time. And so at that point, I remember just bawling uncontrollably before my husband and saying, I don't get what this is for. Like, I don't think that God exists. Like, and if he does, then this is trash. Like, this is like, how can any good come from this? How can this even, um, be anything that a good and loving father would want for me? And my husband, poor man, he married me because of my faith in the Lord, and that's like what our marriage had been founded on. And so I can, I know that it was scary for him, but he did have faith that the Lord was going to be faithful in that. And we found ourselves very quickly after in a pastor's office, and the pastor just said, like, well, I mean, Amanda, like, yeah, you totally, like, the choice is yours. You can totally walk away. Can you, though? Can you take all the evidence that you have of your life? Can you take all the proof and all of what Jesus has done in you and just toss it to the wayside and say it was for nothing and walk away? It's like, I can't give you that answer. You have to wrestle with the Lord. Are you going to be willing to wrestle with the Lord like Jacob did in the desert? I left that meeting and I really didn't know what my answer was going to be. It just came to terms with, like, well, I can't deny everything that Jesus has done for me since I had become a Christian when I was 15 years old. And I had seen all the evidence of what he had done. And so while I didn't know what wrestling with the Lord would look like, and I didn't know what the outcome would be, I trusted, by the grace of God, to wrestle with the Lord. And so that's what that part of my journey looked like.
Thank you for sharing. I know
Mm-hmm.
it's probably, even after doing multiple interviews and writing a book, I'm sure it's still not easy to even talk about. Amanda, what happens to your soul? What happens to your emotional well-being undergoing a traumatic event such as rape?
Yeah. The best way I can describe it, and I describe it as soul murder. Like, it is. So if you think of rape, I think one, like, really important thing to understand is that rape really has nothing to do with sex. Sex is a gift from the Lord that is meant to be mutually pleasing, mutual vulnerability, intimacy between a husband and a wife, and it is a gift from the Lord for us to enjoy in that context. And the enemy is so good at taking good gifts and defiling them. And that's exactly what he does with rape. He takes that vehicle of intimacy and mutual vulnerability and he turns it into something that is all about violence and control. And it's dehumanizing and it's taking away someone's power and it's degrading and it's I mean, I do my best that I can in my book to describe what it does to somebody, but it affects every layer of their being, of my being was layered. Not a single part of me was left unscathed that night. And I think it is just so important for us to recognize the gravity of that and to fully acknowledge what is taken. And it's important to do that, not to dwell on it, but so that Jesus can restore it. We have to acknowledge what's been taken in order for Jesus to be able to fully restore it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I use the example of if your house is broken into and something is stolen or items are stolen. When you call the insurance company, they ask you to itemize what was taken along with the value of that said item so that you can be reimbursed or they can replace it, whatnot. And in a lot of ways, that it's like such a simplified way for me to explain that that's what Jesus does for us in the midst of that. Like, I don't want to, it's so important. It's so important to acknowledge the gravity of what's taken, but not to stay in that, and acknowledge the freedom that Jesus provides when we're able to hand that over to him as well.
Mm-hmm. In your experience, is emotional and soul healing possible after rape?
It is. I would say yes. I have wrestled with that a lot. I think it's also really important to acknowledge that this is a lifelong journey that I'm on.
Mm-hmm.
And full redemption and full healing for me, I have accepted, will come when I'm face to face with Jesus. And until then, he is faithful to guide me and to peel back deeper, like layers of healing as I'm ready, and to heal and soothe those, and to use that to grow me into the woman that he's designed me to be, and to show me more of his heart, and to give me more compassion for others. So yes, it is possible. It takes a lot of effort and energy and intentionality, and it
Mm-hmm.
is not pretty. But I think it's also so important for us to give ourselves that understanding that there are times when Jesus can heal us instantaneously, and then there are times that it is a lifelong process that we
Mm-hmm.
don't fully arrive at until we're face to face with him in heaven.
Yeah. What has been the biggest help to you during your healing journey that you're still on? I mean, we're all
Mm-hmm.
still on that journey, but what's been the biggest help to you?
So I do go over this. I mean, I'm like referencing my book an awful lot, but certainly my relationship with the Lord, I call that my backbone. It needs to be strengthened and attended to every day. And then I think it's all like interconnected, having my rib cage, my inner community, my circle of people that are well trusted, to be able to love life back into me and breathe life back you know, into me, and speak truth and life over me is incredibly important.
Mm.
I had to learn how to laugh again, which
Mm.
is like, I had to learn how to delight when situations arise for me to do that. And then just figuring out, like, what now? Instead of thinking, why me? But changing to what now? Like, okay, Lord, what now? What would you have me do with this? And like, in the midst of like all that encompassing, the biggest component that I have needed for my healing journey, and I think we all need for our healing journey, is the 7-letter F word, which is forgive. I had to walk the journey of learning how to forgive the man who raped me.
I'm going to ask the boys to quiet the puppy. I'll be right back. But
Okay.
I have a follow up for that.
Okay.
Hey guys, boys. Didn't go. So sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. I have dogs and kids and all the things. I understand.
My daughters are at church and my sons are playing video games and the dog's barking
That sounds about right.
and sending money to my daughter who has to buy lunch. Okay. Man. Okay. Let me get back into that box. Okay. So you were
Forgiveness.
talking
I had to
about
learn to
forgiveness.
forgive. I had to learn to forgive.
That's a lesson I'm learning.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a victim also in a different way, lots of different ways. I mean, I think we're all victims Obviously, we are all victims in this fallen creation. How do you forgive? And perhaps even more importantly,
Hmm.
why? Why? Why would you forgive him?
Because I had to learn that unforgiveness, if left to grow, will crack the very foundation upon which our faith is laid. And my unforgiveness was affecting my relationship with the Lord. It was affecting all my other relationships around me. And it's interesting, the Lord told me kind of early on in this process that I was going to sit up on the stand and give an impact statement. And during my impact statement, I was going to forgive him. And I liked everything up to that part. Like, I like that he's getting justice. I like that he's getting all this. But really, like, anything but this. Please, Lord, like anything. And I had to acknowledge that my unwillingness to forgive was negating the power of the cross. And it was a misunderstanding of the gospel. And so I think we have this misconception of forgiveness that, like with our kids, siblings, they bicker all the time. Sometimes I think my girls fight about what they're going to fight about the next day. And, it's like, oh, be gracious and forgive. Like, say you're sorry, okay. And then they go off and they run and they play and they're best friends again until they're not. But we forget that forgiveness cost Jesus his life. It hurt Jesus to death, and it causes us to have to die to ourselves. And so I do, this is a really long answer and I'm sorry, but I do outline the process of what the Lord led me through in forgiveness and acknowledging that it's not like a one and done thing. There are times when I need to go back and revisit and say, like, oh yeah, I already forgave him for that. Like, that's at the cross. And it's acknowledging that the cross is big enough to absorb the evil that's been done to us. And it's not so much about giving the perpetrator or the person who's done us wrong permission to continue to do that. And it's not saying that it's okay what you did. It's saying, I'm no longer going to carry this weight and bear this burden that Jesus came to die for. And not only that, he died, he rose again. That's really where like our hope is that he rose again. We don't have to stay Saturday morning saints where we're wallowing in the death of our Lord, because he rose in victory, and he rose in victory for us on our behalf so that we can walk in that here on this earth. And so while it seems crazy and completely unnatural to forgive something like this, and it is unnatural in our
Mm-hmm.
human
Mm-hmm.
self, it is such an important component to healing.
So there's a verse. Yeah, I think that's quoted a lot, especially like on honeymoons and leading up to marriage. Like, yeah, that don't let the sun go down on your anger
Uh-huh.
in First Thessalonians 5, I think. But the second part of that verse is don't give Satan a foothold. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's through our unforgiveness that we give Satan control.
Mm-hmm.
But can you truly like forgive? I mean, does it feel in your heart? And this is, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. I can cut this out. Um, do you feel in your heart like you've truly forgiven that man?
So recently I read something that said the Apostle Paul was welcomed at the gates of heaven by the very people he martyred. And that's what the gospel is. And it hit me. I was like, oof, how would it be if this man surrendered? Like, I have had to come to terms that I don't know where his heart is. I don't know where it is with the Lord. But I've had to accept that if he does surrender his life to the Lord, the cross is big enough to absorb that, and that he would be in eternity with me. And the Lord rejoices in that. And that, for me, seems really off balance and is hard to accept if I'm completely honest. But at the same time, that's not for me to decide, and I'm thankful for that. And I think, like, in my heart, I have forgiven the best that I can with where I'm at, with what Jesus has equipped me with.
Mm.
I don't know that I would sit down with that man and wash his feet at this point, which always, like, boggles my mind. Like, how did Jesus wash Judas's feet that night,
Mm-hmm.
knowing
Mm-hmm.
knowing that he was going to be betrayed? And I always go back to that for myself. Like, if we're to be like him, like, Jesus washed Judas's feet, knowing full well what was coming and what was going to happen. And so I guess the, like, answer is yes and no.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a process for sure, Amanda.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure it's continual. Like, it's a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not. It's like love. It's like love in
Yeah.
marriage. Like it's not an emotion. It's a choice. I am going to love this person. I'm going to put their needs before
Right.
myself.
Yeah. Corey Tenenbaum said that forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart.
Yeah, it's so good. And
Mm-hmm.
she forgave. Like, wasn't it
Yeah.
like
Like, she shook the guard's hand, like, that was in the concentration camp, and told him, "I forgive you,"
where her father and sister died?
since her died.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Mm-hmm.
incredible. What is one bit of advice that Amanda Collins Johnson would give to someone out there who, I mean, that sadly, the statistics state that there are likely lots of people who are going to listen to this who are victims of rape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What advice would you have as somebody who has walked through this, for somebody who's struggling, somebody who's on the other side of that?
It's so hard to pick one thing,
Maybe the
but
first thing.
I
Yeah.
would, okay, well, the first thing would be, um, that I would say if someone reached out to me is, I would say, thank you for trusting me with your story.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell them that no matter what the circumstances were, it was not their fault. It 100% was not their fault. And I would sit and cry with them. I would just, like, my heart breaks that we're in this club together that's lifelong, regardless of the fact we didn't solicit membership, but the dues have been taken from us. And then I would just encourage them to just lean into the Lord, because he truly is the answer to our healing. Like, we're not broken. We are broken people, but we're not projects in need of being fixed by each other. We're people who are in need of an appointment with Jesus, like the man that, that was brought down from the roof with his friends before the Lord. Like, that would just be that's always my goal, and my intention is to get that person before the Lord, because only the Lord can meet their needs with
Mm-hmm.
where they're at. And I would encourage that person to just wrestle, look perfect. Yeah. And then I would say, Jesus wins. Like, at the end, it sounds so trite and it sounds so corny, but Jesus wins.
He does win. Your book, what prompted you to write it?
Oh, a lot of different things. But I guess the short answer is the Lord called me to it, and I said no. And I went on and decided to do the Dopey Challenge at Disney instead, because that my time was better used running. If you don't know, the Dopey Challenge is a 4-day race at Disney where you run a 5K, a 10K, a half, and then a full. But joke's on me because I did the Dopey and then I wrote about it in my book because the Lord used that in my healing journey, and I still had to write my book. Um,
Mm,
but I wrote my book to serve as a guide and a beacon of hope, if you will, for people who have walked through this journey to know that they're not alone and to be equipped to return to the land of the living,
mm,
and also to give insight to loved ones and pastors and anyone who works with victims to know how to better walk alongside us in a way that is loving and helpful. But really, my book is one of my Ebenezers. It just like I wrote it as an offering to the Lord of like commemorating how far he's carried me in the last
mm,
16 years.
mm,
Like, and it is a testament of his faithfulness and of truly how I can look back and see his fingerprints all over my story when I felt so abandoned by him.
mm.
I wasn't.
The title Beyond Survival
Mm-hmm.
is a picture, right? It's you're not just surviving. It
Mm-hmm.
seems as though, from an outsider looking in, it seems as though you're thriving very much with your beautiful family and the things that you guys have going on. The
Thank you.
subtitle, Reclaiming My Life After I Survived Rape.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that your life is yours at this point, that you have reclaimed your life?
I would say I have reclaimed my life, but my life is not mine. My life belongs to the Lord. Um, so yeah, I've reclaimed it through him for his glory to do with what he would want with my story.
Hmm.
Um, and I chose the title Beyond Survival because I was left alive. Like my story is unique in the fact that I legitimately could have died at the hands of this man. And it came out in trial that had he known that I could identify him to the extent that I could, he probably would have killed me.
Mm,
And so, and people were so thankful as they learned that that was me, that I survived. But the reality was, I wasn't thankful. I longed to be with Jesus because I knew that then I would have healing and I would be
mhm,
whole.
mhm,
And so while I was left alive, I wasn't really living a full, abundant life that Jesus came to give us. And so it's, yeah, like being beyond just existing. And I do my best every day
yeah.
with what the Lord has given me to be able to walk in that abundance that he has for us.
I just want to keep asking you questions. Um, I know we're already over time, and so I apologize. Just a couple more if you have time.
Sure. Sure. Let me see what
Um,
time it is. Yeah, that's fine.
do you have contact with the other victims?
So the young woman who was after me, I had short contact with her. She's actually from a different country, and so we don't. And then the last victim, I had contact for a while with her mother. Um, but I think as I entered into my adulthood and I was coming to all these milestones that her daughter would have been also, it was just very painful
Hmm.
for her. And so we certainly, I mean, we are still friends on Facebook, but it's not really beyond
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's got to be so hard.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I think it's hard. It's so hard for parents And,
Hmm.
you know, yeah. Amanda, thank you so much for the privilege of being able to have this conversation. You are truly a hero and you're doing a tremendous work. And I know that God's affirmed that in you and for you and is going to reward you handsomely for all that you're doing.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Without people like you, it would be a lot harder to get the message out. So thank you for the opportunity. It means a lot to me.
How can people find a copy of your book? How can people find you to have you come and speak at their event?
Sure. My website is amandacollinsjohnson.com. So you can contact me through there. On Facebook and Instagram, my page is called Tears Speak '07, just all spelled out. Tears stands for Teaching and Empowering Assault Rape Survivors. Um, and then my book is available online anywhere books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can go through my publisher, Redemption Press, and put in the title and it'll come up.
Absolutely. And from what I've seen, I only see 5-star reviews.
Yes. Yeah, so far. And, for people who read it, please do give it a review, even if it's not 5 stars. I would love all honest opinion or honest feedback.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for taking time away from your family. For us, I pray that the Lord blesses you and prospers you on this continued journey of redemption, but also bringing healing to other people.
Thank you. Amen.